Hello class, today the topic for our discussion would be the possible reasons for the failure of business. So what all kind of possible reasons are known till date by very many kinds of studies that have been done. So these are the possible reasons which have been identified to be a possible reason due to which the entrepreneur might be failing into his processes of getting into the business, or an ongoing business plan might be defeated. So looking onto these reasons, these are only some of these reasons. The first one says that inadequate front end planning. Inadequate front end planning means, it simply means that if an entrepreneur is getting into a business, so first of all he will have to check on for the studies. He will first of all be going for business surveys. Business surveys means that what kind of business he is entering into. He will first have to go into those studies. Studies means he will have to make strategies that how is he going to enter into the business plan. Second thing is how is he going to plan up his process for the either the production or for the service phase. Third thing, who basically are going to be the consumer. As we know that there are slabs of the consumers. We say that these kind of people are going to consume our product and these are not going to be consuming. So we will have to get focus onto our consumers. Next thing is the entrepreneur also has to make kind of changes, like what all are the business existing plans, how many are the competitors already available into the sector, how many more people are to be employed, and all these things are to be thought earlier. So first of all he will have to make feasibility study. Feasibility study will simply let him to understand that is the organization or the business plan which the entrepreneur wants to get into, will this business plan exist into the market, how many competitors is he going to fight into the market, what are the chances of getting success into the business strategy, and how can he transform his business idea into the existing business, what all things are to be kept into mind. All these things come under the feasibility study. It simply gives him the idea and also a power to analyze the risk that he will be focusing into his near future. Next thing is the planning. If an entrepreneur is getting into the business without any kind of business plan, he is assured to get defeated. Why? Because without planning any kind of thing, without having any kind of strategy, if he is directly implementing his idea into a business, so without any planning he will simply be losing out something or the other which would be very much crucial for the pace of his business. So that is why it has been said that inadequate front end planning. Front end planning directly means that if we are focusing into a business, what all things are to be planned first. He will be planning up the business idea, he will be planning up the strategy for the production of the service provision and all these things. If if the entrepreneur is failing into all these kind of business plans, then he will simply be failing into entering into his business. Or if he has somehow entered into the business, his business is not expected to be running for long time duration. So this is the first point. The next point says that there is insufficient capital for startup and backup. This point also somewhat relies on the first point, that he might be lacking up into the provisions of getting into the business in terms of his capital investment. As we know that before entering into a business, we must crucially focus on the management of the money. Why is it so important? Just because if an entrepreneur is getting into the business, then he first of all would be knowing that how much is the input amount needed for the fixed assets, like the land he will be requiring, the machinery he would be utilizing, or the other resources, like if he is going to employ some people for his processing, then what would be their salary allowances and all other things. So that all has to be calculated. Then before starting up the business, he will have to make a economical plan, that how is he going to get the people, get the investment for the business. Second thing, how is he going to manage up all these things. Third thing is, if once he is implementing that money into the market, how is he going to fetch it out in terms of profit. Profit means that whatever amount has been invested into a business, whatever amount has been spent over the total process of his business, he must get out some amount more than the total amount invested. So that is, he must also be assured that he is going to fetch out profits from his business plan. Similarly, we are seeing that insufficient capital for startup. Startup simply means that when a business is starting, he is not actually focused on earning into the profits. He will be directly the basic task will be to invest his money into the business. So he should also be assured that in the startup he is going to survive. How is he going to survive? That he should not be spending all of his money into the starting up. Why? Because if just after the startup, if he meets out any kind of adverse conditions, he should also be able to sustain those kind of adverse conditions. So it is meant by this, that insufficient capital for the startup. Next thing is for the backup. Like I have already said that if the startup has already been done, but if an entrepreneur sees that there is some kind of problem with the machinery, and this machinery needs to be maintained, and if the entrepreneur is not having sufficient money to get this money to get his machinery repaired or to get it replaced, then the whole of the business idea would be flopped, just because he is not having sufficient amount for his backup. Backup also means that if he is having some kind of competitor with him and he is providing some kind of additional value added things to his or her product, then this entrepreneur should be also capable to compete into that kind of goal. Otherwise the competitor will fetch out the whole of the market towards his side, and this entrepreneur might not be able to fetch those things. Third thing says insufficient or inexperienced management. Inexperienced management simply means that all the new coming entrepreneurs are lacking this point. Why? The management is so crucial that it has been seen into the many kind of studies that if an entrepreneur is not manageable, I mean to say that if the entrepreneur is not having capabilities to manage all the things, that he might be defeated into his role of the entrepreneur or into the role of a business planner. Why? The entrepreneur being having knowledge of the skills and other things, he should also be knowing that how is he going to manage out all the employees who are working into his organization. Second thing, how is he going to manage all the raw materials or the supplies which are required, which are to be uptaken by this organization to convert those into the products. Third thing is, how is he going to manage out all the things, like how is he going to take his product to the consumers, how is he going to make people aware that this kind of product is also existing into the market. Simply saying that management has a wide kind of things that are to be seen. If an entrepreneur is lacking any kind of thing, or he is simply inexperienced, or if he is not having capabilities to hold those kind of thing, these will simply lead to the loss into the business. The other thing would be, he would be able to get key role players into his business, like he can have any kind of accountant, the lawyers who are specialized into the different kind of fields and who are also able to manage. People are trying to avoid those kind of people just to save their money, but this kind of thing can also lead to huge losses into their business, because if we are devoid of certain legal essentialities that are to be done and we are not doing it, so simply we are losing out our points onto the scale of our business. Why? If we are missing out certain kind of taxes, and if we are not having certain kind of licenses which are very much essential for our organization, so it would be considered simply as illegal, and illegal practices are to be banned strictly by the government. So there are very many examples when such kind of industries have been abolished from this particular sector. Next thing is wrong location. It is also a very much crucial point. It is simply a basic thing that is to be known. If any kind of business is being implemented into a particular location, then we will also have to look into it, that if we are going into a market, then that kind of market should be also having that much of available amount that the consumer is capable enough to buy our product. As we have seen that, let's take a simple example. If we want to start up a business that is somewhat related to gems or jewelries, then we will be directly going into the market that is of in the reach of high class people. If we are directly going for a jewelry showroom into a village place, then it will surely not going to exist as smoothly as it could into a high class market. Why? Just because the location is not actually correct. Why is the location not correct? Because the people into that particular society are not having much of capital to spend or to make expenses over such kind of things. So the location is also very, very much important. And the next point is inventory mismanagement. Inventory mismanagement simply means that what all are the expenses made by that organization, and what all are the things that have been purchased, what all essential resources have been uptaken by that organization. These all have to be maintained in a database, and if that particular database is mismanaged, then what is it going to be done? What is the basic loss of it? the basic loss is that we will be devoid of the data. With this particular data we can simply make our decisions. So if we are not having inventory managed properly, then we are simply losing out on the data, and the data mismanagement simply means that we will be lacking on our decision making part. And as we know, for any kind of industry the decisions are very much important. Why is it so? It is so because every organization, while they are deciding very many important and crucial things, they first of all need data. That data is to be interpreted, and it is actually executed by the personnels who are basically at the management level of that organization. And if the data is insufficient or inappropriate, it would simply lead to wrong kind of decision making, and there are chances when company might simply lose on just because of the inappropriate data. So it is also a very crucial point to have the correct data, and that is to be executed directly. So inventory management is also very much crucial. Now we will be following up on to our some of our next points. Let us see them. Next point is the too much of capital into the fixed assets. This point simply states that whatever is the startup amount that is available as in terms of investment with the entrepreneur, he will be investing a major proportion of it into the fixed assets. Fixed assets simply means that the whole of the land that has been acquired for the business practices, the whole of the machinery, the such kind of things. If these kind of things are have the largest proportion of the investment, then it would create a problem. Why? Because at times it has been observed that if an entrepreneur is raising the money and if he is investing too much of it into the fixed investment, then he might be lacking up the some amount for rest kind of things, like for management. If the manpower is very much required, then the uptake of the manpower will be difficult. Why? Because for every person that has been employed by the entrepreneur, for every employee he will has to pay salary, and if he is lacking into that part, he will be simply losing out of it onto his work. The next thing is if the labor is also not available, if the raw material is also not suitably available, then this would be creating problems for the business. So it has been said that while uptaking the fixed assets, the entrepreneur has to be he or she has to make proper appropriate I mean to say that the proper and adequate proportion has to be made while assessing the total amount of expenses to be made over to the fixed assets as well as the unfixed assets like the employee etc. Next thing says the poor credit practices. Poor credit practices, it simply means that like in the business models of India, we have seen that the whole of the retail market is simply based on the credits. credit simply means that the product will be made available to the retailer, and the retailer after selling his product he will be fetching out the money, he will be taking up his profit, and the rest of money will be provided to the supplier and ultimately to the manufacturer. In this way the whole of the money is circled into this whole of the business cycle. So if the credit is managed inappropriately, inappropriately means that if the supplier is not working properly, he is delaying in the credits, and if he is not providing the credit properly and he is not taking out the credited amount back on time, then these things are simply going to create a backlog of money. Backlog of money simply means that at times when the money is required, then the manufacturer or the supplier would not be having sufficient money to provide the retailer or the consumer with the product well on time. So these things are creating a gap between the manufacturer as well as the retailer. So ultimately this kind of lack or the gap would simply lead to a business loss, or it could simply turn out to be a reason for the business failure. The next thing is unplanned expansion. It is very commonly seen into the business models, especially into the smaller business scale businesses. Why is it so? If an entrepreneur has entered into a business, he has only one unit that has been employed into it. If he is capable of earning very large profits from that organization, he will simply get excited and he will try to expand. Expansion simply means that one organization is already working, so he will try to get into another organization. Simply means that either he is going to extend up his branches into the various other sectors, or he will simply enter into some other kind of business. But it actually requires very huge planning. Why? Just because he will have to look after the already existing business, he will have to devote his time into another business. Also while managing this particular business, he will also have to take care of very many kind of things, like for planning of the new business, for getting investment for the new business, or very many things. So what has been seen into such kind of cases is, if once the entrepreneur has created the second enterprise, then he might be lose onto his first one also. So it is being said that if he is requiring the position of expansion, so into that position he will have to be very much planned before entering into the expansion phase. So it is also a vital point. Next point is having the wrong attitude. It is also very commonly seen that while entering into the business, the person might be very much enthusiastic. With that stamina he enters into the business after working for a long period of time, and when he sees that the cycle has already started, the business is running smoothly, at that point of time the entrepreneur might think that now I do not need to work more. Now I am very much tired, I have already worked for last 10 years. Now it is the time that I should rest. Now it is the time that I do not need to go into that kind of practices. Or his the behavior with the clients, the behavior with the subsidiary organizations, he is not behaving actually, he is not behaving correctly. So what all these kind of wrong attitudes are going to do, his name will be deteriorated into the market. If he is not paying attention towards his business, the business might get a slope downwards. So all these things are directly connected to his personal attitude. So if the entrepreneur himself is not having the correct attitude, the employees, the clients, etc. might also be it would not be correct to them, and they would simply lead to the downfall of the business. Next thing is inadequate records and financial knowledge. It is also it is somewhat connected to the points that we had already discussed, and it is having certain new things like record keeping, also not only about the managerial things but also about the accounts, the finance and all those things. These are also very much essential to be kept and to be kept correctly, because insufficient and inadequate data would lead to incorrect managerial calculations, and it will directly lead to incorrect decision making. Also the financial practices, if these are inappropriate, like if the poor credit practices are seen, if the poor purchasing and all those things are lacking very much, these also are simply going to make the entrepreneur defeated into the goal of his business. So these all are the basic 10 points which are calculated to be the major among the reasons for the business of the failure. There are also certain minor points that are to be discussed, but actually these are the basic points that have to be that are to be checked correctly. So that is all about this whole topic. Thank you.